Awesome. Alrighty, so where we're going to pick up in the book today, we are on page 32 in the chapter more about alcoholism. And I think I got all excited, and I forgot to say that I'm an alcoholic. So let me just do that so I'll be quiet. So page alcoholic, pick it up on page 32. Now, I've been saying, if you've been following me around today, you're probably sick of this little historical fun fact. But for those that... No, not sick of the fact. All right. Well, real quick, what I just want to remind us all, as everyone's trying to find page 32, is 90 years ago today, Bill Wilson, our co-founder, went to the town's hospital for the last time. He showed up to the town's hospital with 2 bottles, and he was like, "I got it, Silky." And Dr. Silk was saying, "Oh, goodness gracious, Bill, you certainly have. Off to bed with you." But that surrendered action that he took 90 years ago today is what allowed us to be here today, meeting on this Zoom room 90 years later. And I bring this up, and it's really been something that has just been on my heart today, is for those that are on the precipice of a decision. For those of you who are here today that are like, "I don't know if I can take this leap of faith." Not the leap of faith to go to the Tennessee Roundup, but I hear that's what all the cool kids are doing. Vivian invited us. But that leap of faith into this work and this way of life. And I mean that if you're new. I mean that if you're struggling. I mean that if you've been in and out of Alcoholics Anonymous. If you're at the precipice, when you're looking down the barrel of these 12 steps as a way of life, and you're scared and you're not sure whether or not you can take that leap of faith. December 11th is a beautiful day to take that leap. Because 90 years ago, Bill Wilson took a surrendered action. And as a result of that, and following that surrendered action up with the surrendered actions that later became our 12 steps, we get to be here today. Now, he came to the town's hospital December 11th. His spiritual awakening was 3 to 4 days later. And I also want to make a note of that, because if you're new, if you're struggling, if you're in and out relapsing, or if you're just in a lot of pain today, I want to emphasize, it does not take long to get well. It does not take long to recover. And that's the message of hope. So, page 32. Y'all should have had time to find it. So if you're not there, I don't know what to tell you. Page 32. And we're going to pick it up with the first full paragraph. And so it says, though there is no way of proving it. Now we're in the chapter more about alcoholism, and what we're trying to laser beam in on is the idea of the mental obsession, the obsession of the mind. And that is the thought that I have when I am sober that takes me back again and again and again to that first drink. So that's what we're trying to laser beam on. And what we're going to do is, as we go through, we're gonna see a couple examples. And right around the corner is our first example. And we'll actually try to see ourselves and see this guy, man of 30, in the cycle. So it says, though there is no way of proving it, we believe that early in our drinking careers, and I always like to make the joke, only an alcoholic's going to make a career out of it. Early in our drinking careers, most of us could have stopped drinking, but the difficulty is that few alcoholics have enough desire to stop while there is yet time. We have heard of a few instances where people who showed definite signs of alcoholism were able to stop for a long period because of an overpowering desire to do so. Here is one. And now what we're going to get into is the man of 30. Now, if you are a visual learner, I don't know if this is going to be helpful or not, but I make little sticker designs and stuff like that. So this is the man of 30, but I got some friends who insist that he should be called Carpet Slipper Guy. So I made this little design, Carpet Slipper Guy. And it's just if visuals are like helpful for your learning process, there's a little visual for our friend, the man of 30, Carpet Slipper Guy. And I'm also just going to bring up the cycle, because we're going to have a look at it here in a little bit. All right, so it says, a man of 30, and I will go on a brief tangent. The only downside to getting sober young is that I have a look at the age 30. It's referenced a number of times in the book. And when I get here, I'm like, 30? Oh, old because I was here in my early 20s. I know, shame on me. I feel it too. And then now 30's in the rearview mirror, and I'm like, oh, I regret I ever thought that. So, a man of 30 was doing a great deal of spree drinking. So he's not a daily drinker. He's drinking in binges. Does that sound familiar? And it says he was very nervous in the morning after these bouts and quieted himself with more liquor. And so what that means, we're going to get a real sign of the physical allergy. But it is a subtle sign of the physical allergy, that he's drinking himself into a situation where he's got to have those morning drinks. The hair of the dog, as some people call it, because he's waking with that anxiety. Have I ever done that? Does that sound familiar to me? He was ambitious to succeed in business, but saw that he would get nowhere if he drank at all. Once he started, he had no control whatever. Now, when it says he had no control whatever, you can make a little note that is the physical allergy. So the physical allergy, once I start to drink, I can't control the amount that I take. That is the physical allergy. And so we want to make and also, is that my experience? That once I start to drink, I don't have the ability to control the amount every single time. Is that my experience as well? So he made up his mind that until he had been successful in business and retired, he would not touch another drop. And I know I did the abrupt screen share. I was like, oh, it's bright. I'm the one that did it, and it was off-putting to me. But right here, when he says like that he has this firm resolution, he is not going to drink until he is successful in business. We can make a little note as we're trying to see our lives in the cycle and ourselves in this book. My friend Terry, I do a study with him on Friday. He talks about how this is a book of mirrors. And I want to see my experience in this book. I want to see myself in the man of 30. And as we have a look to see ourselves in the diagnostic criteria of alcoholism, and we go on to read some of the promises and some of the hopeful aspects, I mean, we can hold that up as a mirror for us as well. Is that my experience as well? So it says he made up his mind that until he had been successful in business and had retired, he would not touch another drop. So that is him swearing off. And it says an exceptional man. He remained bone dry for 25 years and retired at the age of 55 after a successful and happy business career. Now, I want y'all to know, when it says 55, when I got here, I'm like, it's an old dude who was an older dude. But nowadays, I am like, 55? He retired so young. Good for him. The change that happens in AA. Now, when it says bone dry, what that tangibly, physically means is he did not take a drop of alcohol. That's what that means. But I find the use of the phrase bone dry just a little telling. And maybe that isn't your experience, but it's mine. Now, the spiritual malady is not diagnostic of alcoholism. There are people who are not alcoholics who have the spiritual malady, but it is helpful to understand, at least it was helpful for me to understand, that when I put down the bottle, I didn't feel better. Well, actually, I felt better. You guys know what I'm saying? Like, I am feeling better, And so when it says bone dry, I'm sure you guys have never had that experience where you go to a meeting and you got that old timer that hasn't done a step in years, and you don't want to have a cigarette next to them because you're afraid they're going to go up like kindling. You know what I mean? Dry. Only you can prevent forest fires. So that's the sort of like that I'm trying to avoid. But I just think bone dry is pretty telling. An exceptional man, he remained bone dry for 25 years and retired at the age of 55 after a successful and happy business career. Then he fell victim to a belief. Now, this falling victim to a belief is the mental obsession. falling victim to a belief. So I believe the lie. See, as an alcoholic, when the mental obsession hits, it is a lie. And it is whatever lie the illness, if we want to personify it, needs to tell me to get me to take that first drink. This time will be different. Nobody will ever know. And we're going to see what the belief was for this man of 30, what his belief was. But falling victim to a belief is the mental obsession. And I want to point out, which practically every alcoholic has, that his long period of sobriety and self-discipline had qualified him to drink as other men. That was the insane thought. And when I try to find examples from my own life of the cycle, I try to think of a time where I've sworn off and said, I am not going to drink again. And then I want to try to see if I can figure out what was the thought that I had before I took the drink. Because before I take an action, there's always a thought. And what was the thought? And in this case, the thought was my long period of sobriety and my exemplary example of self-discipline has qualified me to drink like other people. That was the insane thought. Now, we might not have had a 25-year stretch of sobriety, but have we ever had stretches of sobriety? Maybe it's 1 month, maybe 2 months, maybe 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, and drank again. And thought, no, that was just something, I was a teenager. I was young then. Or, the problem was I was married to that guy, But my long period of sobriety, I can drink normally now. Have we had any experiences like that? And then it says, out came his carpet slippers in a bottle. That's why he's carpet slipper guy for some of my friends. I don't care. I don't care if he's carpet slipper guy or man of 30. That's not a hill I die on. I just think that's fun. And so out came his carpet slippers in a bottle. In 2 months, he was in a hospital, puzzled and humiliated. 2 months. I want to point something out. When he was in his 30s, before he hit the age of 30, he had never once been hospitalized for his drinking. And to be hospitalized for my drinking is an indication, again, that I have the physical allergy, because most people are stopping their drinking before they get to the hospital. Actually, most people stop before they hit wet pants. In fact, they stop before they're missing a shoe. But this guy is drinking himself into hospitalization, which is, again, a sign of the physical allergy. But we see that the allergy has progressed. It's gotten worse. And it says he tried to regulate his drinking for a while, making several trips to the hospital meantime. So regulating his drinking is trying to exert some control over the physical allergy. Have we ever tried to regulate our drinking? All those things we try, like I'm going to drink water in between drinks, or I'm going to snort cocaine in between drinks, whatever you do, Some of you guys know. Yeah, like all the things to try. I'm going to stick to like beer and wine. I'm going to lay off the hard stuff, or, my problem is gin, but I think I can drink tequila like a lady. Please understand, nothing in my life has ever happened ladylike. All right. And it said, so he tried to regulate his drinking for a while, making several trips to the hospital meantime. Then, gathering all his forces, he attempted to stop altogether. So when he's trying to regulate it, it's not working. And so he hits this place where he is swearing off again, just like he swore off at the age of 30. I am not going to drink again. So gathering all his forces, he attempted to stop altogether and found he could not. And that's a sign of the mental obsession. Every means of solving his problem which money could buy was at his disposal. Every attempt failed. So we would see him swearing off and drinking again, and swearing off and drinking again, and throwing money and doctors and psychologists and psychiatrists and drinking again and drinking again. Though a robust, so a healthy 55 man at retirement, he went to pieces quickly and was dead within 4 years. And that is that stark reminder of the fatality, but also the progression of this illness. And because I do a bunch of them, I can't remember which stories I've told where. So if I told you guys this last week, I apologize. There was a gentleman who lived in the recovery community that I live in Calgary, Alberta. And I remember it was at a time when I was looking for a new sponsor, and I was considering asking him to be my sponsor. He had about 15 years at that time of like continuous sobriety, and he was a lovely man, and he was this he had such a peaceful, calm aura. And it was like right after I had the idea to ask him, he relapsed. And where his relapse took him. This was a pillar of the community in the city that I lived. He worked at a treatment center. He was a good man, and he became the homeless gentleman in the meeting that was yelling, that was screaming, that was scaring. You know, that person that's disruptive and you have to have business meetings. That is who that man became, where it was alarming and frightening. Now he's sober again. And he's actually got, I can't remember what it is, maybe around, I don't think as much as 5, but I think between maybe 3 and 5 years sober. You know, and what a miracle that is. Now, that was a gentleman that, as far as I knew, never ended up on the streets, never ended up in that sort of level. Like, that progression is real. And it is wild to watch it before our eyes. Now, if you're one of those people that's like, because I'm here for that, who's who? Like, who's this guy? So if you're wondering, who is the man of 30? So I have 2 pieces of information. The one is that there is a similar story in a book that is known as The Common Sense of Drinking. And it was written by Richard Peabody. And the description of this guy is on page 123 and 124. But it's not a perfect fit. And so in the book, Writing the Big Book, it talks about how this man of 30 is probably more likely just an anonymous gentleman, an anonymous patient that Dr. Silkworth had been familiar with. So that's all the information I have about who the man of 30 is. But I don't think any of the history husbands are here, so feel free, so I might just make something up, you know. So his name was George, and I don't know, I'm making it up. It's not real. We don't know who exactly it is, but it's possible it's Richard Peabody, and then it's also possible it's just somebody that Dr. Silkworth had worked with. So, top of page 33, and welcome those that just joined us. This case contains a powerful lesson. Most of us have believed that if we remained sober for a long stretch, we could thereafter drink normally. But here is a man at 55 years who found he was just where he had left off at 30. We have seen the truth demonstrated. And I always want to make a note of words like demonstration and demonstrate. Because often in reference to demonstration, what we're talking about is what I got to do. I've got to be a demonstration of these 12 steps in my life. I've got to be a demonstration of this power. But in this instance, what we are seeing demonstrated. So the reason I emphasize demonstrate is because demonstrate is not an idea. Demonstrate is not a theory. Demonstrate is not just me sounding good in between the prayers at a meeting. Demonstrating is an example. And in this case, we have seen this example in our lives. It's not a theory, it's a fact. Demonstrated again and again. Once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. Now I'm going to come back to that line. Commencing to drink after a period of sobriety, we are in short time as bad as ever. And so what they're saying is, if I have examples of my life of the physical allergy, where once I start to drink, I cannot control the amount that I take. I can't ever drink again. Because if I drink again at, 5 months, 5 years, 50 years later, I am going to have the allergy and it is going to set off again. If I have the allergy, I have the allergy. And that leaves me with the idea that I cannot drink again. Now, we often understand that when we come to the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, that I can't safely drink again. But often what is the missing piece is the mental obsession. And just for our purposes, just talking about this, when it says, once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic, what that also means is just as there will be a time, never a time in my life when I can ever safely drink again, because I have the obsession of the mind, there will also never be a time in my life when I cannot be fully engaged in the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. Because as soon as I stop that process, for an alcoholic of my type, that obsession will come back and I will drink again. Now, the truth is the matter, I'd done some work, so I probably have some coasting. I could probably coast for a little while off the work I've done. But I'll tell you, I will be miserable really quickly, and you'll all know it, and not want to hang out with me. I will burn every relationship I have to the ground. And I will get to that place where I back myself into a corner where there is no way out, whether I think it or not, or believe it or not. And then inevitably, and always sooner than I think it will, a thought will come that will tell me, this time will be different. Nobody will ever know. You got sober young, like all these things. You can drink like a lady, and I'll take that drink and off I go. And that is alcoholism. Physical allergy, mental obsession. So it says, and this is actually going to tie into this next line where it says, if we are planning to stop drinking, there must be no reservation of any kind, nor any lurking notion that someday we will be immune to alcohol. And when I work with my sponsees, we go through the book line by line and we stop here. And I ask, do we have reservations? And I give some examples of what a reservation could be. A reservation could be but I want to have champagne on my wedding day. Or I want to be able to have I had a sponsee that's like, I want to do heroin when I'm 80. And I was like, why? Okay. Those sorts of reservations. Or that reservation of once I get my family back, I want to be able to drink. Those are some examples of reservations. And so we got to smash through those reservations that I could ever safely drink again. But there's also other types of reservations. The other types of reservations, and I had them when I got here. The reservations I had is, if something happens to me, I don't know if I can stay sober. And I don't mean to scare anybody, but not all, but most of those had happened. I was like, if I don't ever get to finish university, and I got sick right before I was supposed to graduate. I did end up going back and finishing, but a lot of the things that I thought, man, if that ever happens, there's no way I could stay sober. Those were some of the reservations. And so do I have any of those? And then the third type of reservation that I have, or one could have, is about having reservations about the program of action. I don't want to make that amends. I want to sponsor others. I don't want to share that thing in my fifth step. And so, almost invariably, when I'm working with people and we're going through this, they say, no, we don't have any reservations. But I always say this anyways. Because I know us. We're not going to cop to it. I always say, because what do we do? What do I do if I have reservations? What do I do with that? Do I just give up? No. If I've got reservations, what I can do is I can take it to God. And I can take that to prayer on a daily basis. God, higher power, creator, spirit of the universe, I ask that you relieve from me this reservation. Help me to know that I can trust in you absolutely. Something like that. Whatever words you want. Or if it's a reservation about whether or not we have to do this thing. God, I pray that you would help me to see the truth about who I am and the nature of my illness. I can take it to prayer. Alrighty. So it says young people. And I want to make the joke, that was me once. I'm still young. I don't think I'm old. I know I'm gonna get some strongly worded letters if I keep doing that. Young people may be encouraged by this man's experience to think they can stop as he did on their own willpower. And this is a beautiful example of this book meeting us where we're at. Because can you imagine just reading this? And maybe you have, and you're like, oh, I'm just going to stay sober for 25 years and focus on work. That's what I can do that too. And the book is meeting us right there in our delusion and our like, yeah, I could be the man of 30. What's up? I'm carpet slipper guy over here. I can stay sober, right? And it's meeting us there. And it's going to take us where we need to go. And I always like to point this out because this book is a book of grace. I don't need to be perfect. In fact, I can be deeply flawed and frequently wrong, as my sponsor will point out. And the book will meet me there and take me where I need to go. And this is where we need to go. So it says, young people may be encouraged by this man's experience to think they can stop as he did on their own willpower. We doubt if many of them can do it because none will really want to stop. And hardly one of them, because of the peculiar mental twist already acquired, will find he can win out. And when we see that word or that line, phrase, peculiar mental twist, we can make a note that that is the mental obsession. So because, and it makes sense because I'm not able to see reality. What is reality as an alcoholic is that once I start to drink, I can't control the amount that I take. And I drink myself beyond lines in the sand that I said I would never cross. I drink myself into pain and to suffering and humiliation and degradation. But when the mental obsession is on me, it's like it's twisted. And all I can see is, no, it'll be fine. No, it'll be fine. I might even get a pang in my gut that it is a bad idea. And it's, no, it'll be fine. That's what we're talking, the mental twist. I can't see reality for what it is. So because of the peculiar mental twist already acquired, we'll find he can win out. So because of that, we're not able to stay sober. And that is important. Several of our crowd, men of 30 or less, had been drinking only a few years, but they found themselves as helpless as those who had been drinking 20 years. And that's one of those things. I got sober young. I got sober in my early 20s, but I was just as hopeless as those that had been drinking longer. And now, I don't recommend repeating this because it's not the most spiritual, but I got sober young. And there was, some, those clever jokes and people that would be like, oh, yes, I've spilt more on my tie than you ever drank. So the non-spiritual response to answer that is, if you spilt less, you might have got here sooner. Ooh, there might be an amends there. But the truth is, I talk about this quite a bit where in my lifetime, I've gone to about just over 50 funerals. And I'm 36, I think. Yep. Sorry, I had to do the math there. And I've gone to over 50 funerals, most of them under the age of 30. This illness does not discriminate. And if this thing has me, it has me. It does not matter how old I am. It doesn't matter the family I come from. It doesn't matter how smart I am, how pretty, successful, like all these things we are. If this thing has me, it has me. And if I am not sure about whether this thing has me or not, I can ask myself, when I drink, can I control it every single time? And when I've wanted to stay sober, have I been able to stay sober? And if that's my experience, this thing has me. It has me. All right. So it goes on to say, to be gravely affected. Gravely means fatal. For this illness to be fatal, one does not necessarily have to drink a long time, nor take the quantities some of us have. It's not necessarily about the consequences or the quantities or the years of drinking. It is about lack of control, physical allergy, and lack of choice. And if I have that, it is fatal. And then it says, this is particularly true of women. Look at me. I have demonstrated. Potential female alcoholics. I will point out this is the only time in my life I ever saw potential. I'm like, oh, there it is, my potential. I'm just a potential alcoholic. I got some news. Not even there I have potential. I'm a real deal. I got this thing. Potential female alcoholics often turn into the real thing and are gone beyond recall in a few years. And that word recall, like it is to like bring back. Like they're gone beyond the point where we are able to bring them back very quickly. Like it gets bad quickly. And I can't speak for all of us, but I will share my experience. It got bad very quickly. If you're worried, oh, she got young, don't worry. I burnt my life to the ground quickly. I am an efficient sort of alcoholic. You know what I mean? I took my life to a place of unmanageability quite quickly. Dumpster on fire, kept inefficient, got there. Hopeless, quickly. Woo! And also, if you hear things or see in this book things like potential alcoholic, real alcoholic, well, what is the difference between a potential alcoholic? Why do they make reference to it? And just for those that are interested in the history, when Bill Wilson was primarily writing this book, there was the potential for a chapter to be on the potential alcoholic. And I think Hank was wanting to write it. No, I don't think anything had been penned for it. And what would be the difference between a potential and a real alcoholic? Well, not much. Sounds like the potential just got some potential. You know what I mean? How would we differentiate? You know, if I have this thing, I have this thing. So don't worry too hard to be like, oh, but maybe I'm a potential alcoholic. Got mental obsession, physical allergy, you're the real deal. I got some news. And that's it. That's what makes us the real deal. That's it. No other characteristics. You don't have to have a certain number of DUIs, divorces, lost house, lost jobs, cars, marriages, shoes. Don't have to have any of that. It is about loss of control, loss of choice. That is it. That is it. So it says certain drinkers who would be greatly insulted if called alcoholics are astonished at their inability to stop. We who are familiar with the symptoms, again, I'm just going to make it as simple as possible. The symptoms of alcoholism, physical allergy, mental obsession, those are the symptoms. That's it. See large number of potential alcoholics among young people everywhere. But try to get them to see it, right? It doesn't matter if I'm young or not. If I'm an alcoholic, I'm like, I don't see it. I'm not like you. I'm different. Now, in this chapter, what we are given is two ways in which we can diagnose ourselves. So the first way we had, and we spoke about it probably last week, that I could diagnose myself as an alcoholic. If you're here today and you're like, I don't know if I'm an alcoholic, the first way we spoke about last week, and that was to go out and try some controlled drinking. So the 3 drinks and stop for 24 hours. And what we are testing to do is to see, do I have the physical allergy? So stop. So 3 drinks and stop for 24 hours. That is the test. And do it more than once. That's the test. And I've never sat down with anyone who is like, oh boy, let me try that. You know, everyone is like, oh no, I don't need to try that. I know what will happen. Now this is the second experiment. We're going to see this in this paragraph. So it says, as we look back, we feel we had gone on drinking many years beyond the point where we could quit on our willpower. And this is important. If I am an alcoholic, my willpower does nothing to prevent me from taking the first drink. Believe me, I have willpower in other areas of my life. But when it comes to not taking the first drink, my willpower does not work. My being on guard does not work. My, playing the tape does not work. My self-knowledge does not work. The consequences do not work. So it says, if anyone questions whether he has entered this dangerous area, whether or not I can quit on my own willpower, let him try leaving liquor alone for 1 year. Just don't drink for a year. Just don't drink for a year. 365 days, and I hope it's not a leap year, because then that's 366, and who's counting? I'm happy to be sober, you know? Just don't drink for a year. And what we are testing to see is, do I have the mental obsession? Do I have this mental obsession? Because if I can use willpower, like, great, but here's my experience. My willpower drives me into suicidal ideation until I gotta take a drink. That's just me. You know, willpower does not work for me. So, it says, if he is a real alcoholic and very far advanced, there is scant chance of success. That means, oh girl, that's not happening. If you're an alcoholic and far advanced in your alcoholism, ooh, that's not likely. But then it goes on to say, because if you're like me, hi buddy, my dog's here. If you're like me, you're looking for all the ways that you're different and all the ways we don't fit in, and the book is meeting us there. So it says, in the early days of our drinking, we occasionally remained sober for a year or more, becoming serious drinkers again later. And so, because if you're like me, you're like, well, I maybe had a year sober. I did 6 months. But I have a feeling if we're hanging out with me on a Wednesday night, now I love you, but I have a feeling if we're hanging out on a Wednesday night, you don't have another option. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, truly. And I'm going to take a bit of a tonal shift. This is a pretty, like, tragic story. There was a gentleman, I used to do a big book study with somebody in person for a number of years, and this was before COVID. And we would meet and we would start the big book study off by putting the cycle on the board, the whiteboard, and explaining the cycle. And then we would invite people to come up and share examples from their own life of the cycle. And there was this gentleman, and God bless him, like he touches my heart. Like, he had this huge warm belly laugh, like he had this like a jolly, like, Santa laugh, and he was this big strong man, and he had this laugh. And the one thing that I always remembered about him is he would always make sure to come up and thank even me for doing the big book study. You know, to thank me and let me know he appreciated it. Bless you. Sorry, I know it's the worst when I catch that stuff. And he would come up and he would thank me. And he shared this story that he had about how he had been sober for a year, and it was dry. It was dry, and he just focused on going to work, and he stayed sober that year. And he described it as like that final attrition. And the one day, it was just a day at work, and it was just the mental obsession was on him because he was frustrated. Not that that's always what it looks like, but it was on him. And he took that drink, and he'd been continuing to relapse ever since. And when I met him, he was actually in a treatment center, and he shared that story. And I think of him. Part of the reason, now this is where it's getting heavy, so I'm just kind of giving the heads up. Part of why I always think about him is when we think of an alcoholic death, I think we think, oh, liver cirrhosis. Maybe we think as much as a DUI. Well, that gentleman then relapsed. And in his relapse, he ended his girlfriend's life. And he was sent to prison. And we never think about either side of that situation being an alcoholic death. But that is the reality of this illness. And that is the power of this illness, because that is not who that man is. Do you know what I mean? That is what he did under the lash of alcoholism. Do you know what I'm saying? Like that, I've never done anything like that, but I'll tell you, when I'm drinking, I do things I wouldn't do otherwise. And that's the severity with which I treat this illness. So it says, though you may be able to stop for a considerable period, you may yet be a potential alcoholic. We think few to whom this book will appeal can stay dry anything like a year. Some will be drunk the day after making their resolutions, most of them within a few weeks. So if you are here today and you're like, Paige, I don't know if I'm an alcoholic. Well, you could just not drink for a year. And you can do all the things you want to do to try to not drink for a year. All the things that you can think of. You can go to rehab. Heck, you can go to meetings. You can do all the things that you can think of to just not drink for a year. But chances are we've tried it. Chances are we've tried it. You know, it's like, again, when I sit with sponsees and I tell them, here's what you can do. You don't even have to hang out with me every single day going through this book line by line and taking a rigorous course of action. Yeah, you can go to Greenland, which I will let you know, traveling to Greenland, quite expensive. We know there's a bottle of scotch waiting. If we're an alcoholic, we'll find it. I was looking up flights to Greenland. I'm like that. I'm like, ooh, it's expensive. But I can try. But the odds are, if you're here today, you have tried other means to get sober. Odds are, if you're here today, you have tried to stay sober for a year on your own power or on human power, and it has not worked. Because why else would we be hanging out? You know what I'm saying? And so it says, for those who are unable to drink moderately, so those of us who have the physical allergy, that's me. I am not able to drink moderately. The question is how to stop altogether. Because that's the thing. I know beyond a shadow of a doubt in this moment that I cannot ever safely drink again. But if I don't take a course of action, I am going to drink again. And it says, we're assuming, of course, the reader desires to stop. Which, I love that sentence. Because it's saying like, hey, dude. Okay, it's maybe not saying, hey, dude, but for me, it's a hey, dude. If you don't want to quit drinking, you don't have to. You don't have to. We're not forcing this on anyone. But if you have the desire to stop, we can help. And it says, whether such a person can quit upon a non-spiritual basis. That non-spiritual basis is basis of life. So on human power. And we're going to talk about examples of non-spiritual bases to quit drinking. Depends upon the extent to which he has already lost the power to choose whether he will drink or not. Now, having lost the power of choice, if you're writing in your book, you can make a note. That is the mental obsession. Because the reality is, if I have alcoholism, I do not have the ability to choose whether I will drink or not. And that is a frightening thought. That means there's no defense. There is no ground. I am in free fall and a drink is inevitable. I don't have the ability to choose whether I will drink or not. The drink is coming. And so often I talk about things like, we hear things in the rooms like it's not a race. That's not my experience. It is a race. Now, I'm not racing you. I'm racing the mental obsession. I'm racing the inevitability of the first drink. Heck, I'm even racing that window of willingness where I burn my life to the ground and I'm willing to take actions I was not before willing to take. Because if you've ever sat on the side of the amends where you know you got to make an amends and you start putting it off, ooh, that window begins to close. You know what it's like when we burn our lives to the ground and we scrape ourselves off. You know, for me, it's the bathroom floor. And I come to Alcoholics Anonymous and I'm willing to do anything. And we get a couple of meals. We get a couple good nights sleep. And maybe we start getting a job. Maybe we get a relationship. And I don't got no problems. I got it. I got it. Don't you worry. I got it. I got this thing. And how quickly I can stay sober on my own power. I don't need to do it, right? And so what are non-spiritual ways to quit drinking? Well, it is things like doing the geographic, moving from city to city, moving from house to house, changing friends, changing job, taking a trip, not taking a trip. It looks like and there's nothing wrong with some of these, seeing doctors, psychologists, psychiatrists, treatment centers, detoxes, sober living, jail, prison, things like getting into a relationship, getting out of a relationship. And then if you're like me, back in, back out, back in, back out. That was not good. It's things like just going to meetings. Just going to meetings. It's things like just going to meetings and even being of service at meetings. Now, I'm not anti-meeting. I love meetings. Meetings are helpful and important, and service is helpful and important. But if I have alcoholism, it's not enough to keep me sober. It's not enough. And we can look at all the non-spiritual ways we try to quit drinking. Focus on work, focus on the gym, focus on the relationship. Even things that are like beautiful, like focusing on our children. I know people who tried to have children to stay sober, and it not work. And if my experience is I can't stay sober on those things, man, I am in grave danger. And it says many of us felt that we had plenty of character. So we felt like, I have morals, I have values. I'm not a giant piece of garbage, although I promise you, I feel like I am more often than not. Like, I feel like I have these things. We had plenty of character. And it says there was a tremendous urge to cease forever. A tremendous feeling deep inside of myself. I need to stop. I need to get off this cycle. I need to not do it anymore. A feeling inside myself, I don't want to do it. Yet, we found it impossible to get off that cycle. And it says, this is the baffling feature of alcoholism. This is the thing that we don't get and that our loved ones don't get. The baffling feature of alcoholism as we know it. This utter inability to leave it alone, no matter how great the necessity or the wish, no matter how much I need to, no matter how much I want to, no matter how much I have to, I can't stay sober. That is alcoholism. That is this illness. Like, that's what we're looking at here. And it says, how then shall we help our readers determine to their own satisfaction whether they are one of us? To their own satisfaction. Because the truth of the matter is, I'm not the one that needs to be convinced of your alcoholism. I think you are, by the way. Yes, I do think you're an alcoholic. I don't know why I did it in that voice. But we are the ones that need to be convinced of our own alcoholism. I'm the one that needs to be convinced. If you're like me, you probably had people who were very concerned about your drinking for a long time before we were open to seeking a solution for it. I am the one that needs to be convinced. And the good news is y'all don't need to convince me of your alcoholism. I believe you, though. You need to convince you, because I am the one that needs to be convinced, because I'm the one that's got to live this way of life. And only when I am convinced am I willing to grab a hold of these 12 steps, which, let's be frank, is not an appealing course of action, I would like to do anything but that. It is ego deflation at depth. I'm trying to avoid that, I'll be the wacky waving, inflatable arm flailing tube man of ego. A little, but I don't want to be all the way deflated. You know what I mean? I don't know if that's the weirdest metaphor I've made all day, but we're in the top 5 for Paige's weird metaphors of the day, for sure. Top three. Yeah, we got verification. Top 3 on that. Oh, yeah. So the experiment of quitting for a period of time will be helpful, but we think we can render an even greater service to alcoholic sufferers and perhaps to the medical fraternity. So we shall describe some of the mental states that precede a relapse into drinking. For obviously this is the crux of the problem, that baffling feature of the problem. So what we're talking about there is the mental obsession. A broken regulator, and yeah, absolutely. I just was catching up to the chat. Sometimes I work on a delay. And so what are we talking about? What we really need to laser beam focus on is the mental obsession. Because most of us are able to grab a hold of the physical allergy pretty early. But what makes this condition hopeless is the thought that I have before I take the first drink that takes me back again and again and again to the first drink, knowing that it's ruining my life. Knowing that I know I can't drink successfully. By the way, successful drinking involves dry pants in both our shoes. That's successful drinking. I've never done it. But I know it's ruining my life, and I go back to it because that's what we need to focus on. So what sort of thinking dominates? And that is a beautiful example. Because sometimes the mental obsession looks like a case of the suddenlies. As we'll get into Jim's story, Jim has a case of the suddenlies. But sometimes it looks like that thought that dominates us. Take a drink, take a drink, take a drink, take a drink, take a drink. And it is eroding and eroding and eroding at any sort of defense that I tried to raise until I take a drink. And that's what it looks like at times. But just as much it looks at times, this time will be different. Nobody will ever know. It looks like I got to get it out of my system. I just got to get it over with. I'll go on a big bender and I'll have a good surrender. It rhymes. It looks like, I'm being miserable to everyone in my life. I got to take a drink or two, take the edge off, and I'll be nicer to everyone. It looks like I'm going to kill myself anyway, so why don't I get drunk? It looks like, man, if you were feeling the way that I was feeling, if you're going through what I was going through, you get drunk too. It looks like F it, F you, F this, F the steps, F the big book study, F my sponsor, F it, I'm getting drunk. It looks like, it looks like that. But I also, for those of us who've been around here a little while, I want to make a note of sometimes what the mental obsession looks like. Because sometimes it looks like I don't need to go to as many meetings. None of my sponsees are staying sober. That's not true. Look at you go. But none of my sponsees are staying sober. I just got to really focus on my career. Focus on my family. Now, it is important to focus on job and focus on family, but we can see the erosion. I don't need to pray. I don't need, actually, it's meditation that we stop doing well before we stop praying. I don't need to meditate today. I don't need to pray. Nobody does evening review every night. I got some bad news. I do. I don't need to make that amends. I don't need to share that thing in my fifth step. You know what I mean? It is an erosion of the course of action that allows me to live in a state of grace. That's sometimes what the mental obsession looks like after I've been around here a while. Because I'm busy and I'm doing the deal. And so alcoholism can't say to Paige, take a drink. I'm like, I can't. I've got to do Vivian's big book study. I don't got time to take a drink. I'm busy. And so what's it going to say? Oh, Paige, you're doing so much, and I do need to take rest days. That's okay. But it is an erosion of the actions that allow me to live in that state of grace. And so that's what we want to look at. The thought that I have that precedes the first drink. And that's what our problem is. I talk about it this way as well. All my alcoholism wants is one more drink. That's all it wants. That's it. Not too costly a price to pay, hey? Just one more. And it doesn't matter whether I'm 3 drinks in, 1 drink in, 3 drinks in, 3 weeks into a bender. Just one more. That's all it wants. Just one more. And it doesn't matter if I'm sober 1 day, 2 days, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 months, 10 years, 15 years. All my alcoholism wants is just one more drink. So it says, what sort of thinking dominates an alcoholic who repeats time after time the desperate experiment of the first drink? And doesn't it feel like a desperate experiment? No, this time it'll be different, despite all the mounting evidence that it won't be. Friends who have reasoned with him after a spree which has brought him to the point of divorce or bankruptcy are mystified when he walks directly into a saloon. Why does he? Of what is he thinking? and we can make a little note, the mental obsession. And we're going to talk about Jim next week, and we'll get into see Jim's case of the suddenly. So I'll leave it there and toss it over to you guys.